It's a little bit of both. I mean, from the president's perspective, I mean, he's come in here and set some very, very bad mood music in advance of this meeting. From the president's perspective, NATO is not just dysfunctional, he's saying that NATO is obsolete. And he no longer thinks that these sorts of large international organizations are the way forward in terms of how the world politically and militarily should work.
Is he right?
Sorry?
Is he right?
I think that he's not telling us what his better version is. There doesn't really seem to be any kind of strategy for replacing NATO. If he says that NATO is obsolete, then it's incumbent on him for him to tell us what's better and what is the way forward. What he's doing is he's coming to Europe with a sledgehammer, but he's not necessarily telling us what he's going to do with the pieces once he wants to smash everything up.
So this is just a redux of the G7 in Canada then? We get the same outcome here, Trump walks away angry, everybody's annoyed, no resolution.
Well, the primary challenge of the NATO meeting is to avoid exactly that, and not to have President Trump leave early, not to have him sort of declare the meeting a failure, not to have him walk away in a huff, just like he did from the G7 meeting in Canada. So NATO here has got to manage this summit in a way that there's something successful and something tangible coming out of it.
Does it help for Donald Tusk to issue jibes about you have very few allies as he arrives here? As you say, you feel Trump confuses NATO and the EU. This is not going to help, is it really?
No, all this does is escalate the rhetoric, and you know the way that President Trump likes to react to these kinds of comments. He gives as good as he gets. He'll get onto Twitter, he'll get onto social media, and he'll say that he doesn't like to hear these sorts of comments coming from people who were supposed to be allies. You're right, the president has conflated NATO and the EU, and what he's kind of saying is that, well, we've got a trade deficit with you, so why don't you pay more into NATO? And those are really issues that run mostly on separate tracks. And so to combine the two really is yet another erroneous way that the president looks at NATO.
He's done this all along, and he's been talking a very similar vein around OPEC, and that a lot of the defense comes from the United States for a lot of those OPEC countries. So probably very likely that he also casts across to NATO the links between domestic foreign policy and trade, and links it all together. But I want to ask you around the 2% goal, because this is coming up continually from the president's point of view. It's a real thorn in his side that you're not seeing the contributions from countries that, as he calls this organization, obsolete. But isn't that part of the problem? The 2% goal doesn't necessarily reflect anything significant. It doesn't necessarily work. I mean, it's been pointed out by those who've gone right through the numbers that a country like Greece has been a long contributor to the 2% target, yet can't deploy a force overseas when required. Other countries like Denmark have been under-contributing, yet they can deploy a force when required. So where is the burden sharing? Where is the risk sharing that's appropriate? And if you really are going to remodel NATO for the future, it's not just about hard 2% goals, is it?
Yeah, that's a very good one. You're absolutely right. First of all, that the president sets up a sort of pay-to-play system. He's talked about this even in the Korean Peninsula, that South Korea needs to be paying more for its defense and Japan needs to be paying more for its own defense. So far, the only line that we've heard coming out of NATO is that the 2% goal is an ambition for 2024, and what you're going to hear today, we think, from all of the members of NATO is that some of us are already at 2% and the rest of us are going to be there, and we're making moves to increase our spending to the 2%. So NATO is staying within that framework, saying get off our backs once we start paying the 2%.
Charles, what is Turkey doing? And why isn't NATO being tougher with Turkey if it's a member? You can't buy F-35s on one hand and S-400 anti-missile systems on the other. I.e., you're buying the latest stealth technology, which is, we saw from the RAF yesterday over London, F-35s from the Americans here, and you're buying the S-400 anti-F-35 system from the Russians potentially here. Something very strange here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you heard Ambassador Hutchison talking earlier about the interoperability and how this all goes away when you start buying missile systems from different alliances.
From Russia.
Yeah, well, exactly. So what Turkey is trying to do, we think, is position itself as a regional geopolitical player. And of course, cozying up to Russia on the energy front, and especially with the construction of the gas pipeline that's going to onboard and go through Turkey. So you can't get rid of Erdogan. He's better inside the tent than outside the tent.
Even if he's buying Russian defense systems that will actually be able to counter American
Yeah,
technology.
and even more worryingly, if he's slipping towards autocracy, authoritarianism, and everything against the ethos of the rest of the alliance.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.